Hey, it's Eric G. Around the House is sponsored by Baldwin Hardware. For 75 years, Baldwin Hardware has been known for its first-class quality and craftsmanship in door and cabinetry hardware. As an alumnus of the Baldwin Hardware Design Council, I can say I have seen the details and quality from design to the finished product. If you're looking for a new style and old-world craftsmanship, I can tell you there is only one Baldwin Hardware. Check out what would look great in your home at baldwinhardware.com.
It's Around the House.
It involves the passing off of birch cabinets as maple. And these issues came to my attention through various decisions and an investigation by the Commerce Department at the behest of the Kitchen Cabinet Manufacturers Association into the dumping of Chinese cabinets below cost in the U.S. market to the detriment of cabinet manufacturers in America and American jobs. And during this investigation, as the Department of Commerce sought to gather information about the extent of the dumping taking place by China.
When it comes to remodeling and renovating your home, there is a lot to know, but we've got you covered. This is Around the House.
Welcome to the Around the House show. This is where we talk everything about your home every single week. Thank you for joining us. You know, I've got a special guest here in the studio. You know, this was kind of interesting. Let me preface this. When I see something pop up on social media where people are asking the right questions, and of course I'm like, all right, we got to dive into this and figure it out because we're getting into a passion of mine. And of course, when I see that, we got to get into a little more information itself. I want to jump in here. Spencer Sheehan, checking out the cabinet industry right now. Welcome to Around the House, man.
Thank you, Eric, for having me.
This is great, man. Thanks for taking the time. You know, I'm cruising through my social media, and, you know, this post just came up as one of the sponsored posts. And I'm like, whoa, what is this about the cabinet industry? And, you know, being in the industry for 30 years, it's something that I have a passion about. You know, and there was this paperwork that I saw that came around here, 6 months ago or so, and I read, but I didn't read in the detail that you did, and you caught some super important details. And, you know, you and I were talking about this before we, got on the radio here today, but it's kind of like when somebody who's out there investigating a murder, like it's the police or something. This is not like a murder, so I don't want to compare those two, but they're focused on that case. And they don't realize that as they're going through that case, maybe there's this parking lot scam issue that they ran into going on the side, but they're so focused on the murder case, the parking lot scam is over on the side. That's a big deal on its own, but they're there to investigate a murder. You know, your dive here, you figured out something very interesting.
This was something that, while obviously not rising to the level of a murder, was nonetheless important and is important. And it involves the passing off of birch cabinets as maple. And these issues came to my attention through various decisions and an investigation by the Commerce Department at the behest of the Kitchen Cabinet Manufacturers Association into the dumping of Chinese cabinets below cost in the U.S. market to the detriment of cabinet manufacturers in America and American jobs. And during this investigation, as the Department of Commerce sought to gather information about the extent of the dumping taking place by China, and when they were gathering the data from the Chinese manufacturers, they discovered that almost all of the cabinets that were being sold to American companies as maple were actually all birch. And I was quite surprised at this, and I started to look a little closer. And sure enough, that's, right there in front of you, and there's no denying it. And, it's something that in my efforts to get more information about this from the participants, Kitchen Cabinet Manufacturers Association and various large cabinet companies. Nobody really, would respond to me or, just even acknowledge what I was looking into. So I'm glad that you thought it was interesting and wanted to discuss it.
You know, it's interesting because, like I've said, I spent a lot of time in the kitchen and bath industry. I've worked for cabinet manufacturers. I've worked for, my own design firm. So it's something that I've had really near and dear to my heart. And it's very interesting. American hard rock maple out there is a nice cabinet wood, right? There's no question, though, that the Asian or Russian birch that you see showing up, it's clearly not maple. But it sounds like the government was looking at this case over there, and all of a sudden they're going, wow, we show a bunch of birch coming in the back door, and wait a minute, all that's disappeared, and it's maple coming out the front, correct?
That's exactly right. And it's even more, astonishing, or at least it was, is that the judge that was assigned this issue with respect to the dumping of the lower cost Chinese cabinets didn't even want to consider, the issue about whether or not consumers were deceived. They said basically, or the judge said basically to the Commerce Department, why are you even concerned about, consumers being misled? Your job is to, be concerned about, this investigation, which involves the below cost Chinese cabinets being sold to, in the American market. And I was, disappointed by that, because you would think that, the government would be, encouraged for trying to ferret out this deception that's taking place.
Well, Spencer, you have a long history with your company chasing down companies out there that have said, hey, I'm selling you or marketing you product A, but you're either getting product A minus or maybe even product C. And you've done some pretty big cases with that.
That is an interest of mine. You're exactly right. And, it's something, unfortunately, that occurs in any area where, a company is selling something to others, whether it's selling, products, food or beverages or car parts or equipment. And it's, often, the case where they will sell you something that is maybe a product that's often a lower quality slightly, but often it's not so significant to make you realize that it is not what it says. Because if it is, often, the trick and, is to make sure that the deception is, as I said, not so significant enough to arouse anybody's suspicion. But if you take that, across, the many transactions and, let's say, sales that occur in the course of, a year or throughout, our market, the harm is pretty significant, because it's a little bit from each person. And it goes to basic, fairness. And it's not fair to the companies that are selling, what they are, advertising. And, that's something that should, just is essential to the market. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for it. I mean, people don't deserve that.
It just shouldn't. Yeah. Well, it's something that I've noticed. But, I just didn't think of it from that perspective side of it. I mean, there's companies right now that I can jump online that are major manufacturers out there. I'm just going to leave it at that, because I don't want to get into the name calling thing and get into that whole battle, at least right here in the show. But there are major companies out there that are selling cabinetry parts that I can look at just in the picture and go, all right, you're calling that maple. And I can tell you what, that's birch.
Well, I'd love if off air you can tell me a little bit more about that. And, I don't want to get you involved in any name calling. And I understand that, but I am grateful for your knowledge of this industry, because to the outsider, somebody who doesn't have, basically any experience in the home improvement or cabinetry areas, it's useful to have somebody who can, help you and show you a little bit more about things from the inside, knowledge that I'd never get on my own.
Have you subscribed to the podcast? Make sure you have. And we'll be right back after these important messages with Spencer. We got a lot more to talk about when Around the House returns.
What's up? This is Stick
And Satchel from Steel Panther, and you are listening to
Around the House with Eric G.
Yeah.
We love Eric G, and you should too.
When I'm down, I make a call. Got the number written on the wall. Frost is busy, then I try again. Oh, who's she talking to?
Welcome back to the Around the House show. Now, we've been diving into this consumer protection thing here because to me it's a big deal. And if you're buying something and you're getting something else, I don't like that, even when it's in the industry that I worked in for nearly 30 years. So let's get back to Spencer and talk about how some people are buying maple cabinets, but they're actually getting birch. That's what's interesting with cabinetry. And I know if one of our listeners is sitting here going, birch, maple, who cares? Maple is a premium wood as far as cabinetry. And it's got a lot of really cool aspects to it. It's like what they make butcher blocks out of because, it's beautiful. It's hard. It doesn't accept stain very well. And that's why they're used as butcher blocks all the time because you can put something on it. There's not any oils or juices that come out of that, whatever you're cutting. It doesn't like to soak into that block. But birch, on the other hand, it takes stain really well. It's a softer wood. And one of the problems with it, especially on some of the birch species, is you do a cabinet door out of it, let's say. Sometimes it can turn a little green, almost like it's got a grass stain on it. There can be some green tinges all over. So it's a completely different product. That's why birch cabinetry, if it's ever used in, kitchen and bath cabinets, it's traditionally used as a paint grade material because it accepts paint super well. But you don't really see it stained because it's not as pretty as maple. Otherwise, obviously, cabinet manufacturers out there would be going, hey, we're selling you clear birch cabinets. But they're calling it maple because it's more expensive wood and higher quality wood, compared to birch.
No, that's exactly right. And, it's a basic question of telling people, the truth about what they're getting. And as we discussed, it's impossible for the end purchaser to know this. And even as I mentioned, for the contractors who are selling you this, because they don't know, because the origins are obscured from the beginning. I mean, if it's coming from, let's say, China, and China's telling the importers into the U.S. that it's maple, how is it, the contractor and the guy who puts the cabinets in their home going to know that it's not maple?
What's also interesting is it's not just the cabinet fronts, door fronts, all that stuff, face frames maybe. It's any of the other stuff you see out there. Many times you'll see the cabinet boxes themselves. Right. So, I can't tell you how many times I've seen with some cabinet manufacturers, you'll see the units of lumber coming in the back and plywood coming in, and it'll be Baltic birch plywood, multi-ply birch plywood, whatever you want to call it, that's pre-finished. But if you grab those sales material out on the brochure, it says maple interior. It's not maple. It's birch plywood. So there's a lot of it out there.
That's exactly
and,
right.
It's still, when it comes down to it, it's not maple. It's birch. But they call it maple in the marketing materials, all for the same price.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, and it's, just one more way that, I guess consumers are not, and I guess America in general is sort of being treated by, this global cabinet industry. And that's what the work of the Kitchen Cabinet Manufacturers Association is trying to stop, just the general unfair practices that are going on, mainly with respect to the kitchen cabinet, domestic manufacturers, because, we all benefit by having, these manufacturers in this country by making sure that our products are safe. They don't have, the formaldehyde, melamine, and, all these other toxic chemicals that, may be used in China that, can have long-term health consequences when they're used in, American homes, and also, just to have, jobs in our communities. So it's an important issue across the board.
Well, I want to jump into the KCMA, the Kitchen Cabinet Manufacturers Association, here for a second. Are there brands that you've run into now with this core paperwork that, people might be scratching their heads going, it showed up in the paperwork from the government, maybe brands we should be talking about?
That's a great question, and I can answer that partly. The investigation was mainly focused on one particular company that the Commerce Department was looking into, and that company was called, and its name will probably have very little meaning to American contractors, Dalian Mason Woodworking. Now, I believe that's a Chinese conglomerate. However, what I tried to figure out, what you mentioned, is about how does this, filter down to the customers? Well, Dalian Mason Woodworking is connected or somehow affiliated with a company called J&K Cabinetry.
They're a familiar brand.
J&K Cabinetry, right. And, they have a lot of, I guess, locations. And I think we had previously discussed, at least ostensibly on the surface, they say that, well, they just sell to contractors or something. And generally, while they may sell to individuals, generally J&K they don't sell to the average consumer in the same way that like a Home Depot might. Most people who get cabinets, they might have a contractor, get, and the contractor will get it from J&K. So it's challenging for, somebody to know, are my cabinets from J&K? Because how, when you buy cabinets, you might get maybe an invoice or something from, the contractor, but then how are you going to know that, they came from J&K? I haven't, seen such cabinets. If they would, maybe have an imprint on them, a marking that says, do they?
Sometimes cabinet manufacturers, and I don't know specifically if J&K is, but I'll do a little research. I'll ask around. I know a lot of people, in this industry because I've done it forever. And it's not going to show up in this episode, but I'll do some research. But many times cabinet manufacturers will try to market their brand. So they'll put maybe, a sticker or stamp on the side of the drawer box, or they'll put a KCMA logo or some other logo like that underneath the sink base cabinet, or it could, then that KCMA logo says that it's certified and it meets their standards. So even sometimes you'll find it maybe on the bottom of a drawer box. So you take the drawer out, pop it over, and there'll be a sticker in there.
You're exactly right. And that's a type. Yeah, those are the places. But heck, it's like finding the serial number on your TV, which is something I dread having to do. When I had to do this for my dad recently, you have to, go behind the TV. It's scary. You have that nest of wires and dust kicking up there. You need to wear like a mask because of all the dust.
Like an electron microscope to read that tiny laser print.
Right, exactly. And, now, yes, technically, you could probably find that information somewhere through the settings. But if you've ever, played with a smart TV or any TV.
If you want to contact me, head over to aroundthehouseonline.com and you can hit the message button right there and it'll go right into my inbox and I'll get back with you. Around the House will return just after these important messages.
Hey, this is Ron Keel, the Metal Cowboy from Keel, the Ron Keel Band and Steeler. We are rocking Around the House with Eric G.
Raise your fist, make your stand for family.
Welcome back to the Around the House show. Now we've been talking about some consumer protection issues, especially when it comes to cabinetry. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
But it will often be in a sticker format. Seldom it might be imprinted on there. But I don't think that, the typical, cabinet user is going to easily find that. So they're not, really going to know. And, for somebody, look, I'm sure, though, that there are people who, care about these things, and they do know that, oh, yeah, my cabinet installer, purchased the cabinets that he used in our kitchen from J&K, distributor. And J&K has distributors or sort of affiliates all throughout the country. There's dozens of them. And this was the main company identified in the legal proceedings. I suspect, like many things, that, this is just the tip of the iceberg, meaning that it might be what we see. But if this is something that one company is doing, then I'm sure that it's something that's prevalent. And it just so happens that Dalian Mason Woodworking and its J&K affiliates is what showed up on the radar. I don't know exactly, let's say the number of significant cabinet exporters to the U.S. are. Perhaps you might be able to figure that out. I'm guessing that there aren't that many, of the big, big companies in China that do it. I would say a handful, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a handful of them out there, but there's a lot of people like J&K, and I think there's other people from these guys that they distribute to as well. There's a lot of other big companies out there that import cabinetry into the U.S. that's made in China. One of the other companies you see out there is like Cabinets to Go, for instance. They import most of their stuff, last time I looked, if not all of it. They're another company that you see that brings in a boatload of stuff from China.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And, it's, they're sort of, right there. And, whether or not they market or label their items as, being by J&K, they may not, because a lot of times, with respect to, third party or sort of private, they may, call it a private label or something. And, the end user will have no idea where the product came from. They'll just know what the label on it or who, manufactured it to them. And, they'll have no way to know that was in fact, something produced by Dalian Mason and, maybe brought into the U.S. Through J&K.
Well, and there's another thing, too, and I don't know if these guys, Cabinets to Go specifically is doing anything wrong here. So I want to preface this. I want to really seriously preface this. But Cabinets to Go is an interesting history. It's easily found, on the internet because, well, even on the Cabinets to Go website. The Cabinets to Go is founded in 2008 by Tom Sullivan, who's the founder of Lumber Liquidators. Now, you remember Lumber Liquidators had a huge problem, and it was seen all over CBS 60 Minutes, where 60 Minutes went overseas into China and found that a bunch of Lumber Liquidators at the time was bringing in flooring that was stamped that it was CARB compliant. The California Air Resource Board requirements of no formaldehyde or low formaldehyde. And they're having formaldehyde glue put in there, but the boxes were stamped CARB compliant. So there was a huge lawsuit over that. And then Lumber Liquidators got in trouble because the test kits they sent out for the formaldehyde came back with a false negative. And so there was a large, just a huge deal over that. And it doesn't take you much to go on the online and research this. It's out there. So there's no debate on that. Check Google, 60 Minutes did a bunch of stories on it. So it's on YouTube, easy to find. But when Lumber Liquidators and him parted ways, he'd already started Cabinets to Go. And now he's running Cabinets to Go.
Yeah, these practices are endemic, and, you fix one problem and, often, there's going to be another because, unfortunately, there's always, money to be made by, or just more money to be made by maybe bending a rule here or there. And ultimately, the price is paid by consumers, whether it's, having flooring that is made with formaldehyde in contravention of state regulations which prohibit it, or in this instance, passing off cabinets as one species of wood when it's actually a lower species of wood. So,
and they had another run-in with the Commerce Department as far as using banned hardwoods. and I'm going to paraphrase this again, and you can find it all on the web, but basically they were buying hardwoods that were not supposed to be exported out of the country, to the United States. But what they were doing is they were taking those exported woods and maybe sending them to a secondary country, where they weren't banned for export. So maybe they were sending over religious reasons or whatever. So for instance, let's go hypothetical on this. Let's say you can't take a species of wood coming out of like Malaysia and send it to the U.S. But if you send it over to South Korea as a legitimate import for like religious reasons or something like that, then you import it over to them, and then you send it over to the U.S. because it's legal to send it from South Korea to the U.S. And so you can do a lot of that right now. And unfortunately, they were taking a lot of protected woods, in these different countries. And they had a big run-in with some problems where they had some pretty big fines for them breaking those rules. And of course, bringing in illegal hardwoods that were not supposed to be used in flooring coming out of those countries.
Yes, that is absolutely, something that is pretty serious, because those regulations are in place to, protect, the various forests and protect the species of wood that, they shouldn't be, harvesting and using it. And it's just unfortunate when that happens. And too often companies, they accept, such penalties and fines and public outrage as just a cost of doing business. And it's unfortunate that should be the case.
Well, and so there's a lot of unknowns with this right now, and that's why we're talking about it today. And you and I can chat more offline about this. That there's a lot that's not suitable for radio or podcast, but I really want to say that I think if you're a consumer out there and you're looking at your maple cabinets that came from one of these companies and you're concerned about it personally, you should do a little more research. And it's really not that hard to start figuring out what's maple and what's birch.
Yeah, that's really important. And, the best way to deal with this is, education, and to just, have a look and to see, it's possible. Like most, companies, I believe, everywhere, they do their best to be honest to the customers. But there are times when, that doesn't happen. And if a consumer or customer is able to, take a look at their cabinets and maybe wants to, figure out a little bit more about, their origins, they should do that. And, part of the way to do that might be to have a look at the underside of, the cabinets, although that might be difficult because often cabinets are affixed to walls and, things. But, you could start by asking, your contractors, hey, where is this from? And, to see if they have any other information that can tell them about, the provenance of these cabinets, and, just follow those breadcrumbs and, see where it leads. And hopefully, it's a situation where, the person, they paid for maple cabinets and that's what they received. But it's also very likely that, that is not what happened. And how prevalent it is, it seems to be pretty prevalent, because from what I've gathered from reading these government papers, Dally & Mason is one of the largest exporters.
We'll be back to wrap this up just after these important messages. Don't go anywhere. To the Around the House show. Now, to me, it's kind of fun to be able to jump into a subject like this early on and see if we can make a difference. Now, let's get back and talk with Spencer here and wrap up this conversation.
It seems to be pretty prevalent, because from what I've gathered from reading these government papers, Dalian Mason is one of the largest exporters, and J&K Cabinetry, as their U.S. affiliate, is quite entrenched in this market. And as you mentioned, doesn't just sell under its own name, but most likely sells, to other companies who then relabel it as their own. So it's something that, we don't have all the information. I've been doing my best to try to get it. A lot of the documents are basically filed under seal so that we don't have all the information, and I've done my best to try to get more information, and certainly that's been helped by your interest in this.
Well, thanks, man. And I wanted to touch on this before we, end our conversation for the day. And, the Kitchen Cabinet Manufacturers Association, KCMA, they're the ones many times when you open up a cabinet, you'll see their stamped label on the inside of like a sink base that says this cabinet was certified by KCMA. And most people look at it and go, who cares? But it meets their standards, which means, and I've worked with cabinet companies that were KCMA certified. And so some of the things that happen is that when you're a certified KCMA cabinet company, KCMA has the right to come in and pull a cabinet randomly off the production line and go test it by seeing how strong the shelf is and all these different things to see if that cabinet meets their criteria, if it meets that criteria for a certified cabinet. So they can show up on a Tuesday morning, and you as a manufacturer have to say, if they grab that third cabinet running down the line and say, time to test this one. And it's really cool how they do that. Unfortunately, as a manufacturer, you now have to build another cabinet.
Yeah, and then those types of things are important to ensuring confidence in, this particular market. And, it's great that they're able to do that. And because in an ideal world, that would be something that's really the province of the government to do. But it's hard enough to get, the government to do, a lot of things that they should. So we leave it to private industry to do. And it's great that I think that the KCMA is, on top of that.
So now on October 4th, the KCMA released a press release out talking about 3 companies that resigned from the KCMA over the trade matters of them trying to protect the KCMA members from this illegal dumping, as they called it, and the stuff was coming out of China. So in this case, the KCMA came out and said they regret to announce that during its board meeting that week, American Woodmark, Master Brand Cabinets, and Cabinet Works Group resigned from the association. And a lot of this, as they're saying, is based upon their fight against these imports from China. Those are a lot of the big brands that you see in the home centers, including people I've worked with for years. And they actually were at the fall conference at one of the Master Brand Cabinet Company areas there. They were at Starmark Cabinetry, and I used to be a Starmark dealer years ago, and they had a tour schedule where they're going to go through the whole factory. Later in the day, they canceled the tour, and they're like, well, we're out of here. We're here for the tour. The board meeting was happening during that fall conference, and after the vote, they called it a day. And usually they're jumping on buses and going to tour the place.
Really?
So Master Brand cancels it, and the rest of the meeting gets canceled. And it's pretty crazy how that whole thing went down.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and certainly worth keeping an eye on as as things unfold. And it's unfortunate that companies should want to part with the KCMA because they do a lot of good for American cabinet industry and American consumers.
So if you walk into the home centers, great point. Now, when you walk into a home center, like a Home Depot, Lowe's, any one of those places, if you see an American Woodmark, if you see that Craftmade, a lot of the other brands inside those buildings in the cabinet departments are guys that just resigned from the KCMA. So it's really interesting. I know that some of these companies, and I can say this because I've been there. I've seen it. I've heard it. I've been at the meetings. So this is firsthand knowledge. And it's not even anything that they're under a non-disclosure agreement or anything that I've signed. But really, a lot of these companies import cut parts for their lower end cabinet lines. So like their base model stuff. So they can't afford to create those in the United States for that price point, is so the argument they make. Those parts they import, units of the parts that are pre-cut, pre-banded, all those kind of things are finished overseas in those factories. So I maybe see why they could be influenced to jump away from the KCMA that could get in the way, because those business practices are what they're fighting against.
That's exactly right. And, the bottom line, unfortunately for many of those companies, comes first, and at the detriment of, the American market and American consumers. And it's just a shame. And, it's good that, you're looking into this, and, you've made it, your, business to, to inform home improvement folks about what it is that's going on in this area. So I thank you for that.
Thanks, man. And, I just see a lot of cabinet companies out there that are doing the right thing.
There are.
Most of them are. And I want to protect those guys because they're doing the right thing in the marketplace. They're selling products. They're saying what they're doing. They're building a good or decent quality cabinet for a homeowner, and they're advertising what they're making. And I just don't like to have to go peek behind the curtain to see that maybe things aren't being what they're sold at. That's kind of embarrassing to me as a designer and someone that's been in this industry for about 30 years.
Yeah, that's not right that should happen. And especially because most of, the companies play by the rules. And it's terrible that there are, companies that don't. And then, they make it bad for everyone. And it's just not fair. It sort of causes, trust to be lost across, the industry. And, it's certainly, it's not fair to them.
So if you've got cabinets that you think as a homeowner or a contractor that you're suspect about, it's pretty easy to get some lab tests done and figure out what wood species you have in your hand. It's not that hard for a lab to do some research for you when you give them a piece and go, is that American hard rock maple? Or is it not American hard rock maple? And you can start to do your own research.
That's exactly right. And, they may not even need to do that because, if we, can possibly have a look and see, well, where, what's the company that came from? And if we can track it down and link it to, the companies identified in the public court documents, then, that's certainly a good starting point. And, it's one of the places that, we can maybe get some answers to these questions.
Perfect, Spencer. If somebody wanted to reach you and they've got these cabinets, or they think they might be concerned at least about having these cabinets, what's the best way for people to find you?
Well, thank you for that. The best way is to, send an email to me, or to go through the website, spencersheehan.com. It has a submission page where somebody can submit their information along with their inquiry. And my email is leads@spencersheehan.com. And that's just one of the emails that I use just to manage the inflow of contacts. And, just in general, to go to my website, spencersheehan.com, and submit their information. And I'd love to hear about somebody's experience and, to help me get some answers and to help them get some answers too.
And it doesn't matter if you're listening to the national radio show or the podcast. You can find me anywhere out there on social media. Just look up Around the House Show. Or you can find me at aroundthehouseonline.com, and you can send a message over there. It's pretty easy. Either way, I'll have this information down in the show notes on the podcast if you're listening there as well. So you don't have to worry about stopping and write. So just make sure you catch the podcast here if you're listening on the radio. And that way you're not getting yourself in trouble out there trying to write this information down as you're driving your car.
Very good point.
Spencer, thanks for coming in today, man. And keep me up to date on how this goes. I'm very curious. This is something that I've got my eagle eye on, trying to make sure and see what happens with it, because it's a big deal out there.
Thank you so much. I hope that maybe this, will bear some fruit. And if you hear anything, don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you for giving me the chance to speak with your audience.
Thanks, brother. Well, if you want more information about this, you can head over to aroundthehouseonline.com and catch the podcast if you're on the radio. And you can message me over there and just hit the Contact Us page, and you'll be good to go. That'll come right into my inbox. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Thanks for listening to Around the House.
Somewhere unseen and undiscovered.
Thanks again for listening to Around the House. If you'd like to support the show, maybe buy me a coffee, a cocktail, a beer, or just leave a tip, head over to buymeacoffee.com/ATH Eric G. That's buymeacoffee.com/ATH Eric G. And the link is in the show notes. And thank you for being a part of Around the House.
Anywhere beyond the mean, life is a love song, let's be lovers. We're all over the radio. Take my hand, I know where to go. All over the radio with you.
Hey, it's Eric G from Around the House. Are you planning a decking or siding project this year? If you are, you've got to check out my friends at Millboard. Millboard is a completely different kind of composite decking and cladding that enhances outdoor spaces with enduring distinction. Hand-molded from the finest oak, it realistically mimics the natural grain and color of premium hardwood. If you're looking for something that doesn't look like plastic and instead real wood, check out millboard.com. Make sure and check out that interview we did just a few weeks back. That's millboard.com.